Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. And welcome to the fourth part of chapter 14. And we have the whole crew here today: Priyank, Chris, Mike, and myself. Are we feeling ready for this episode today?
Mirthful.
Priyank, or for viewers or listeners who can't see, Mike is shaking his head. I feel the same, Mike. It's a very special episode.
Just joking. It is a very special episode because today we are looking at the Samadhi Poem that Guruji wrote, which, as you probably know if you've read the Autobiography, which I'm guessing you have if you're listening to this, is, in my opinion, the best poem ever to grace this earth, because it gives us an insight into Samadhi, enlightenment. And it's really the first time that I ever read something that really told me what it would be like from someone's experience. Mm-hmm. So the format today is going to be a little bit different to normal. So normally we go through it line by line and we read bits out. But today, for copyright reasons, actually, we are not going to be reading out the whole poem, but we will be taking it section by section, as we normally do, and discussing the themes that come up, and we'll be having lots of lovely readings about the different topics that arise from the Samadhi poem. So before we begin, I thought it would be nice for us to share briefly our thoughts, our feelings on the Samadhi poem and the episode that we're about to embark on.
It's such a complex poem. And every time I read it, even though I'm really familiar with all the words, it still stays complex. Probably because it's not yet in my experience, or not all of it anyway. But I'm really looking forward to doing this episode so we can draw out, the pertinent parts for myself, but also pertinent parts for the three of you. I'm interested to see here if you also found them, or not just interpreted them, but experienced them in the same way that I did. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think I just I'll choose the word that Brink said, experience, and actually say that that's what I'm looking forward to. Really, it is an experience when you read it and you live it. You really, for me, really, I feel that it's a way to tune in with the master. So if you're slightly out of tune, sit down to read the poem. It's a pretty good way to sort of tune back in. I can feel it coming over my being that it's a very, very highly charged piece of writing that is just there for us. So whenever I was reading this, I thought, geez, I need to print this out. I need to have it somewhere there. So it's just constant reminders. So yeah, really, really special part of the book.
It does something to you when you read it, and then when you read it again, and then when you read it again, it always has an effect on you. And in preparation for this episode, I think all of us read it probably like 20 times or something, and that was a nice experience. When I first saw it, I was wondering, why is it a poem? Why wouldn't he? Because I think the chapter is called The Experience of Cosmic Consciousness, and that's what Guruji is trying to convey, that experience. And then, as we did this podcast, we mentioned a few times already that when Guruji wants to say something and convey some power, strength with it, he puts it in a poem form, because that adds some extra clout to the lines. And I think that's what he did here at the maximum level.
Yeah, and then you also got whole books on poetry, haven't you? Like Whispers from Eternity and things like that, which also go along these kind of same lines in terms of, he kind of distills some of these lines and talks about them more in those other books. But in reference to that, actually, over the past 6 months or so, I've noticed that Guruji often just writes little glimpses of this poem and this experience in other writings. So I was doing a service reading once and it came up there. I was reading God Talks with Arjuna and twice it came up. And then there's also his experience of Samadhi and some other more quite prominent realized master's experience, which we're going to go through today later. And we can perhaps compare the poem and the other areas where he's also described it, which will be quite nice.
I'm really looking forward to this episode, I have to say. So, without further ado, we'll delve on in. So really, Guruji starts off the poem and he's talking a lot about Maya and the cosmic delusion and the dualities that come with those, and how within these dualities they've been lifted and perished and gone, so to speak. So we're going to have a little reading on Maya and spirit and the relation between the two. And Mike is going to read that for us.
In order to give individuality and independence to its thought images, spirit had to employ a cosmic deception, a universal mental magic. Spirit overspread and permeated its creative desire with cosmic delusion, a grand magical measure described in Hindu scriptures as Maya, from the Sanskrit root ma, to measure. Delusion divides measures out to undefined infinite into finite forms and forces. The working of cosmic delusion on these individualizations is called avidya, individual illusion or ignorance, which imparts a spacious reality to their existence as separate from spirit.
And the really nice section here about calming the storms of Maya. And I found in God Talks with Arjuna this kind of concept described in a bit more detail. He says, Prakriti, this is in chapter 13, verse 19 of God Talks with Arjuna. He says, Prakriti is the storm of Maya, delusion, relativity, that transforms the surface of the calm ocean of God into tumultuous waves of human lives. The vibratory storm of relativity is God's desireless desire to create. So it seems for there to be creation, this kind of Maya storm and our turmoil is required. Otherwise, there would be no show for God, I suppose. There would be no entertainment.
Yeah. But then in Samadhi, that all stills. Yeah, and
very nice.
Is gone. It's a really quite powerful start to the poem, I feel. It's also quite accessible, I feel, because Guruji uses language here which is quite usual in the day-to-day, talks about light and shade and love and hate and health, and we can all relate to those words. So I feel like it eases us in to this cosmic consciousness that we're about to perceive with our minds in this poem.
Yeah, it seems like the first thing that happens is that everything that we do see and feel in our reality is just falling apart instantly, and then we'll see what comes next.
You're right there, Lauren. The first theme and even the first word is quite telling. Vanished, isn't it?
Yeah.
vanished, and it's literally describing all the things that are vanishing. And the really lovely vanishing theme that I like is sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy. Sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy. This is really the crux for me of the spiritual path, and this is why I joined the spiritual path, because I was having lots of moments of fleeting joy and fleeting miseries, and I wanted to calm those dual storms as Guruji describes in this poem so beautifully. And it's just such a powerful line. And Mike behind his head has got a picture of Guruji on a sailboat sailing away into the sunset, into a in a multicolor sunset. Really nice picture. But that famous picture, isn't it, of Guruji standing on the sailboat and sailing away. So I really like this visual image that Guruji has given us of that boat and himself, and in this words, sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy. It's such a tranquil expression of that state that we all want to attain. And there's in Sanskrit poetry, there's like moving from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. All of these kind of things, I feel, that's just encapsulated really beautifully in that theme.
Yeah, like words like vanished, vapor, sensory mirage, shadows. This is all sort of given an indication for Maya, isn't it? It is just an illusion that we see through our sensory apparatuses, so real. And so this is the first thing that seems to be lifted, seems to go, is this connection between what is quote unquote real and what is truly real. So it's quite a difficult thing to get your head around in a state where you do still feel and you're using the sensory apparatus, but to meditate on that, it's extremely powerful beginning to the poem.
I'll add my customary spanner in the works now. It's come in the first 10 minutes. Sorry, Lauren. One of the lines is "perish those false shadows," and then the themes he's talking about are love, hate, health, life, death, disease. Why is love a false shadow? How is love? Love. Guruji talks about love being, a beautiful thing, really, doesn't he? But why is it a false shadow?
I think here he's talking about human love that's finite, not this infinite, the infinite that he's now witnessing. That's what I take from it. The finiteness.
He also mentions the screen of duality, and he mentions here a few opposites, right? Love and hate, health and disease, life and death. And so I think those kind of things don't exist anymore once you're in samadhi. Those are opposites. So
does that then imply that it's only the fact that the hate is only a problem because you also at some points hate and at the same time love certain things, but if you're aloof from both of those, then they can't really impact you?
Yeah, I mean, the Guruji often mentions that we live in a world of duality, and that this is not the norm in the higher realms. So I guess that's how I would imagine that instead of the negative part of it, you only have the positive part left over. But honestly, I've not experienced it.
It's all conjecture at this point.
Thanks for your honesty, Mike.
The disclaimer.
We were unsure until you said it.
Oh, but it really is such a gentle reminder, that line about fleeting joy, that what we are reading, even the positives and the negatives, they are fleeting and they aren't real. And the only reality is the isness, the I, God. So so much is said in a couple of words. It's Guruji's mastery over language, isn't it? But the other line that I really love is "the storm of Maya stilled by magic wand of intuition deep." And I always love that. I remember reading that line. I think when I first read it, just go, whoa, you know. And it conjures up for me this real sense of like calm, still, and it all just kind of, but instantly, you know, like a magic wand. But it got me thinking, okay, so by that note, then it comes from intuition. You know, it's not necessarily some I mean, this is kind of a vision in itself, but like it's not something you see, it's an intuitive experience. And intuition is something that Guruji talks a lot about. And Chris is just going to read out, and so is Priyank, a reading on intuition.
Intuition, the bridge between the soul and the ego. Intuition is the bridge between the soul and the ego's thoughts and sensations. If one can, for a sufficient length of time, remain unidentified with thoughts and sensations, and without being unconscious, he will know through the development of intuition the nature of the soul.
Which one is thus perfect? When one is thus perfectly calm, neither thinking nor sentient, nor unconscious, yet knowing he exists, a keenness of joyful being in which the thinking, thought, and thinker have become one, unity of the knower, knowing, and known. Therein is soul's consciousness.
And we're going to hear more about the knower, knowing, and the known later on. But it's such a great insight, isn't it? In just one word, intuition. It tells us a lot. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, he mentions the dim sensory mirage. That word dim is, I think, quite telling here. That actually in the reality of what he's witnessing, experiencing, sensory mirage is what it is. It's a backdrop. You know, the brilliantness of reality outshines any of our sensory, you know, troubles. Let's say, like the powerful reality that he's witnessing makes the scene dim. You know, so we are in this school where we're trying to overcome, and it might seem quite challenging to us now, but you know, as we graduate through doing the work, this then gets put in its proper place.
It's quite awe-inspiring to perceive and ponder upon that one day we are going to know what Guruji is talking about here. This is going to be a reality at some point in our evolution, in whichever incarnation that comes. It's quite kind of beyond language kind of feeling.
Hopefully there's at least one listener out there that actually knows everything.
Yes, well, I hope more than one.
If the big six are listening, then there'll be six at least.
Yeah. Oh, who knows? But you know, Guruji really does talk a lot about here. It's really about that merging with God, isn't it? And becoming one. You know, the knower, known, and knowing. And here comes another one of my absolute favorite lines, which is present, past, future, no more for me, but ever present, all flowing I, everywhere.
Herein lies the importance of doing this study that we're doing, because I too really always loved this line, Lauren, so I'm glad you picked up on it. But why, whenever we use this paradigm of the past, present, and future, we say it in that order: past, which has happened; present, which is now; and future, which is to come. But Guruji in this line says present, past, future, which is a very important distinction as to what's happening with Guruji right now, because he's experiencing all of creation that's happened and that's about to happen in the very present, which is at this very moment of his realization. So everything is happening right now, which is obviously it's quite easy to just say it, but here he's really put emphasis on saying it in the correct way. He could have just said it in the way that everyone would intuitively read and understand these words.
Yeah, it makes me think, actually, in some ways, perhaps the reason we say past, present, future is because we are, in essence, a product of our past as it stands. You know, we are our habits. We are, living in the ways of our past incarnations, and it's all so really not. You could say that perhaps not many of us are living in the present truly. But here Guruji is, again, subtly but very profoundly saying present first, because that's where he is. There's nothing else. Oh, Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry. That's an interesting thing you picked up on there. I actually read this a million times and never really thought it. So it's good. I guess you guys are right. He puts the emphasis on the present because that's where we are. But then this whole concept of past, present, future, present, past, future collapses when you're in the Samadhi experience. But then he says the all flowing I everywhere. I didn't really understand that part. Does that mean I as being merged with God and now I feel myself everywhere? But I didn't really get the connection between that and the ever-present part of it, that the past and the future is gone.
Yeah, I think he's doubling down on the importance of living in the present, because he says, he kind of says present, past, future, no more for me, but then he says, but ever present, all flowing, I everywhere. So he's already mentioned present here, Mike, in reference to your query. I think I get it. He's already mentioned present here. Now he's got to go back to the previous things, which are past and future. So he's saying, but ever present, all flowing, I everywhere. I from the past, I in the future, are all flowing and everywhere. So I think he's referring to and really cementing this concept that he's experiencing everything all the time, as in the eternal now.
Nice.
Very well explained, Priyank, as ever. Your eloquence knows no bounds.
Guruji's eloquence.
But yeah, that whole notion of just merging and becoming one with God until it's just I flowing everywhere. And really that's the whole essence of this path, isn't it? The self-realization, knowing that, I and my Father are one. And Guruji said that self-realization is the knowing in body, mind, and soul that we are one with the omnipresence of God, that we do not have to pray that it comes to us, that we are not merely near it at all times, but that God's omnipresence is our omnipresence, that we are just as much a part of him now as we ever will be. All we have to do is improve our knowing. And here Guruji really knows, doesn't he?
Really nice reading.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? Really lovely. But in order to know God and know ourselves as we are, we need to transmute some of our material desires, all of our material desires, I would say. And Chris found some lovely readings about this. So would you like to take us away, Chris?
Yeah, there's the visceral line, really. I swallowed, I transmuted all. Ocean of blood that Guruji gives us here. Just got me thinking to the transmutation. And there's a reading here that was given to us by Guruji, and it is about transmuting material desire to the desire for God. It starts: transmuting material desire to the desire for God involves redirecting the flow of prana. We live in exile from ourselves and we are unhappy. But once we know real happiness is in God inside, we are free to do the work. Then we can practice Kriya with willpower and concentration to direct energy and consciousness to the Christ consciousness center. This assumes you're past the point of ambivalence and fear of giving up your toys. Kriya Yoga powerfully works on that energy that is deeply rooted in the lower chakras and difficult to move. We so need to do it with our willpower and intensity.
If you have a particular desire, introspect, get down there and see what it is that you really want and why. The desire for a beautiful house may be a reflection of our desire for the beauty of God. The desire for romantic sex is from Maya, making us feel separate and alone. It reflects our desire to unite with God, to realize our inextricable connection to all people and creation. Analyze your material desires. Do you see how they will not give you what you want, but that transmutation of those desires to God union will?
Transmutation of body consciousness to cosmic consciousness is rebirth, the second coming, the resurrection of Christ consciousness within. Kriya Yoga takes energy from the senses to its home at the source. Turn the car around and go home. We got here through the descent of the soul with energy going down the spinal cord and out. Home is in and up the cord. Prayer, chanting, and the techniques are not meditation. Meditation starts with stillness. So, once you finish the techniques, don't get up. Let the peace absorb into every cell in your body. Don't spill the milk.
Wow. That
Great
was great reading. Where is that from, Chris?
The exact
Power
line,
of desires.
yeah, exactly, yeah. It's
It says 2007 talk by Brother Atmananda, that convocation.
that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So powerful. So powerful.
We'll put a
And
link to
very,
it. Yeah.
very inspiring too. I got so much from that. Thank you so much, Chris, for finding that for us. And I hope that people listening to also got something from it as well. Yeah, Priyak.
Going back a few lines, one of the things that he says here is he talks about creation and, you know, all the energy surrounding creation. And then he says, pretty out of sync, you might say, because he's talking about creation and electrons and burning electron floods. Then he says, thoughts of all men, past, present, to come. And then he's saying, he carries on and he says he's swallowed and transmuted into his own being. So this paradigm of thoughts of all men, past, present, to come, and then transmuting them into his own being. I was wondering, it's obviously a completely insane concept to think that every single thought that has ever been thought or ever will be thought is being transmuted here by Guruji. Am I reading it correctly? Do you think that it's happened, all of that thinking, data, if you can call it data, is like instantly downloaded by Guruji? I don't know how many sextabytes that would be. Mike, maybe you know. But am I reading that correctly? Because it's a really profound thing that would be happening at this juncture. And if so, why is it happening? Why has he put it in at this specific spot when he's talking about creation, like planets, Earth and stardust? What do you think?
Well, I'm no spokesperson on Samadhi, so I cannot, disclaimer, say anything to be truth until I have experienced anything. But I am inclined to feel, Priyank, that yeah, you're right. You know, in that instant, you merge with everything, and everything becomes you. And thoughts, Guruji talks a lot about thought and the power of thought, and how, you know, it's a great energy, right? That travels through the ether. I'm sure you've had moments in your lives where you've thought of someone and they've texted you, or, you know, you think of something and someone else says it, or like the other day we had something in the young adults group, and we had new people joining, and I thought, oh, this person would be amazing, and I was going to text that day, and then Priyank texts saying, oh, what about this person to join? And it was exactly the same. And I feel like those thoughts, that they exist. It's not just something that occurs in our mind, that they are in this ether, they are floating, and it's energy moving around all the time. So that also forms part of creation, in a sense. That's just my feeling. I don't know what you all think about it, but yeah.
The projection of your thought there, Lauren, about that incident, it must have been exceptionally potent and powerful, because if I messaged that day, then you must have been on it that day with your outward intuitive feeling.
Well, it came during meditation, you see.
Oh, there you go. So, wow. That proves it.
It was really kind of, you know.
I just remembered, isn't there a teaching where in the causal world and beyond, this whole creation is just like thought? It's just an idea. And so this whole creation that Guruji is describing here, planet stars, is the fact that we perceive it as physical and real is just when it's actually just a dream creation of God's thought. Could it be that he's referring to?
You have to ask Guruji on that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask him.
Yeah.
If anyone knows, though, has asked him previously, please do comment.
Yes. Has anyone else got any other lines that really stood out to them in this section about the oneness with God? There's a lot in here. Guruji also talks about, again, the dualities, right? And kind of transmuting all of those. But, oh yeah, Mike.
I mean, he does explain a lot about, like what Priyank mentioned earlier. He goes through all the planets and all this stuff. But for me, this line where it goes like anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust, I swallowed, transmuted all. That is almost more powerful, because I feel like those are like the also big forces that drive human life, and that they are also gone in one instance is a very, must be a very uplifting thing. And I love that he mentions every single thing that is coming apart of this life when you get into Samadhi, and he doesn't leave anything out, and he also goes through the negative emotion.
You're on mute, Chris.
Thank you. The vast ocean of blood of my own one being. This line I don't know, really gets me at my core, and I'm trying to pull it apart to see why. But maybe it's some kind of analogy where, we're swimming around in this ocean looking for water. It's something along that. It makes it kind of real for me, like the blood of my own one being, like that he's transmuted everything that exists, even every particle of each particle of universal dust, and it is simply this one being. Every particle, there's consciousness in everything. God is everything. It kind of grounds the poem for me in some way, that line. It makes it very real. There's something about that line that's very, very moving for me.
Well, for some reason I get some feelings of like biblical references here into the vast ocean of blood of my own one being. I feel like it's almost like Christ would say these words in a different way in the Bible. So when I read this, I just think of his oneness with Christ, which is nice. The other thing here, just before this, is that as Mike read out all those qualities that he's transmuting: anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, and lust. Well, that word salvation in there kind of sticks out to me. Why would you need to transmute salvation? Why is it in that list in that group? It feels like it doesn't belong there, but it's there. And it's obviously must be Guruji doesn't do things without intention. What do you think?
I wonder if, these things that he lists, anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust, they're all experiences of humankind at some point in their lives. And, salvation is, to me, it's an act in itself. It's something that happens to us, maybe in little bits or in its fullness. But in a sense, in order to have the unity with God and become one and be that which we are, you have to transmute everything. Everything has to go, and you go beyond the salvation that almost, it goes beyond and within. It's like this whole one experience that happens. It's kind of hard for me to articulate what I mean by this. I hope I'm being clear. But yes, the kind of idea that what we experience, we have to go beyond. And that feels like a human experience. What do you reckon, Mike?
For me, salvation is a bit of a heavy term that is, like Priyank mentioned earlier, probably to be seen in a biblical sense, like, I don't know, deliverance from sin, right? And that carries a certain heaviness. And like you said, Lauren, maybe that's just transmuting it just means to get out of this kind of out of those dynamics and just be free from it.
Being online, the part definition is the state of being saved or protected from harm or dire situation. So this is transmuting that reality and going beyond. There is no way that you can harm the soul, in a sense that it is eternal. It is this part of God, eternity. This is ever new, ever existing bliss. So how can you harm that? So maybe it's this transmuting the reality as the ego, and realizing that as the soul.
Oh, thank you very much. That is actually clearer to me now. And this, so am I getting this right? So, the whole paradigm of forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, that kind of goes into the furnace and the cauldron of all these other things like anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, and lust. And then it all disappears, the feeling of being guilty or needing salvation because we're our souls are perfect, right?
It kind of feels like I think it's Buddhism. They talk about the pathless path. You have to walk the path to get to the pathless path. That notion of you have to have salvation in order to go beyond salvation and not need it anymore. But I loved how you explained that, Chris, your perception of it. It was so clear. So thank you. Yeah, Priya.
Going into this doing a bit of a deep dive into this whole creation, the description of creation and transmuting it, going into it. And, Guruji references stars and volcanoes and electrons and X-rays. In God Talks with Arjuna, Guruji talks about Buddha's enlightenment, and he's actually referenced a similar poem to the Samadhi poem, but from the perspective of Buddha. So is now, Lauren, a good time to go through that?
It's always a great time. I tell you what, this is actually the first time that I have seen this poem, and it's kind of a little bit special for me because I really started my spiritual journey, you could say, in this lifetime with Buddhism, and Buddha and the whole notion of enlightenment just really got me hooked. So now is a great time to read this poem. And in the Gita, it says that the Lord Buddha's ascension to enlightenment, as his consciousness rose through the dark illusions and temptations of earth, then through the heavenly spheres of the devas, experienced as the yogi unlocks the mystery doors of ascension in the spine, is wondrously described by the masterful pen of Sir Edwin Arnold in The Light of Asia.
And this is described in chapter 3, verse 4, if you want to read along with us. So the poem is, and in the middle watch, our Lord attained abhidyana, insight vast, ranging beyond this sphere to spheres unnamed. He saw those lords of light who hold their worlds, by bonds invisible, how they themselves circle obedient round mightier orbs, which serve profounder splendors, star to star, flashing the ceaseless radiance of life, from centers ever shifting into cirques, knowing no uttermost.
These he beheld with unsealed vision, and of all those worlds, measureless unto speech, whereby these wax and wane, whereby each of this heavenly host fulfills its shining life and darkling dies.
But when the fourth watch came, the secret came. The outcome of him on the universe grows pure and sinless, either nevermore, needing to find a body and a place, or so informing what fresh frame it takes. In new existence that the new toils prove lighter and lighter, not to be at all.
That is not where it ends. We're going to talk about where it ends a bit later, possibly at the end of the Samadhi poem. But does everyone else feel like this is just like, imagine if you'd asked ChatGPT or AI to like rephrase this Samadhi poem in some other context, this is what it would come out with. I feel like all the themes that we've discussed are in here. What do you guys think?
So much more cryptic to my my simple mind, you know.
But that could also be because Edwin Arnold is a bit of a his English. Guruji loves Edwin Arnold's translation of the Gita and his other books, probably because of this crypticness.
Yeah. I mean, I think it requires meditative thought and perception, intuition, it's deep intuition for each line, because it sort of sends my, you know, non-intuitive mind into a spin, you know. But it's deeply profound, yeah. If but I had more intuition, I would probably peer beyond the veil that it's sort of raising.
I think we would do Sir Edwin Arnold a disservice if we compared him to ChatGPT. I think this probably came from the depth of his intuition, and ChatGPT is a great productivity boost, but I don't attribute any kind of spiritual depth to it. The Light of Asia, funny enough, my dad translated that book into German. I think it's still the official German version by him.
The LLM does not compete with the CCC.
That's right.
You get that.
Mike, that's so awesome that your dad did that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
In German, yeah, long time ago.
Oh, wow.
It is like Chris said, it's a bit of a cryptic book, so it's like you have to read it a few times to get, but it's great. It's has a lot of spiritual symbolism in it.
Yeah.
Mike's dad's very much a scholar, is why Mike gets his qualities from.
All making sense now.
Mm-hmm.
But it is somewhat impossible or very difficult to fully translate experiences like these into words, isn't it? And in some ways the mystery is telling, because how can you fully encompass that in words? Guruji uses the word ineffable, which I love. It's the first time I ever came across the word was in Guruji's writings, and it really does sum it up, you know. That experience,
which is why he uses poetry, I suppose.
Yeah, because poetry is a creative way of expression, isn't it? For that. But yeah, so, you know, in this mergence emerges a great cosmic joy for Guruji. He says that he describes this joy as smouldering, and that it's oft puffed by meditation. And there we have a little nugget of like a little nudge. A nugget nudge.
Have you puffed nugget today? Have you puffed? Have you had your second puff yet, Lauren?
Yes, actually, just before this podcast.
Very good. Me too.
There you go. And I feel like Guruji's, again, is always kind of gently instructing us on how to live and how to attain and be in this joy. And that's by meditation. And Guruji talks a lot about meditation and joy, doesn't he? And there's this lovely section that Guruji said about meditation and joy. Chris, you are unmuted.
When you sit in the silence of deep meditation, joy bubbles up from within, roused by no outer stimulus. The joy of meditation is overwhelming. Those who have not gone into the silence of true meditation do not know what real joy is.
As the mind and the feeling are directed inward, you begin to feel God's joy. The pleasures of the senses do not last, but the joy of God is everlasting. It is incomparable.
Just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. It does. And then, you know, from that joy,
I had a similar experience to this earlier today, actually. There's a very famous group of CDs called by SRF, like Shanti Mandir and Anjali, by this lady called Mirabai Mataji, and she's this YSS singer, chanter, and she's a nun from YSS in India. She's passed away now, but her voice is like, if you hear it, you go to some unknown place in terms of your meditation. And I like some of the chants that we don't do in SRF, but they do in India. Like they're very close to me in terms of my childhood and things like that. And so I was listening to this Mirabai for the first time this morning as I was walking from the station to my office. And it started with like some sitar and some tampur playing. And then I thought, it's nice, nice walking music. And then she started singing, and she started singing the mantras that I've known since, from my childhood, and then my grandmother used to sing. So I swear I nearly collapsed.
Oh.
It was so powerful, and this feeling that he says here, smoldering joy, gliding my tearful eyes. You get it every now and then, and even music can take you there, can't it? Especially if you hear it with the right frame of mind, and depends obviously what you're listening to. But yeah, and that's probably why so many people love music, isn't it? It's just a very easy way to connect, as opposed to spending years and decades in meditative practice, for example.
I love that Anjali album. It's so great. I used to listen to it on Spotify before it got taken down, but I didn't know that it was a nun from SRF. Wow.
YSS, yeah.
Oh, ISS, yeah. Yeah, wow. And you're right about the music. Sometimes, with the chants, I get that, that kind of tearful state. And here, we get an insight into Guruji's state too, that, his eyes are also tearful. And you made a good point, Prank, about the devotion that comes from that moment when you are, you have tears in your eyes.
Yeah, a lot of people have this even whilst they're meditating, don't they? Sometimes you see very blessed people have like a tear rolling down their cheek. That's how intense the moment is for them. And in chapter 23, Guruji has a similar moment of devotion and gratitude when he's sitting his university exams, when he hasn't done any studying, but Sri Yukteswar tells him to do it anyway, and then he gets some help from some unlikely source, and then he says literally, when I sat for the examination in English literature, my first glance at the questions caused tears of gratitude to pour down my cheeks, wetting the paper. The classroom monitor came to my desk and made a sympathetic inquiry. But yeah, it's because he was in a state of complete reverence in terms of devotion, because he realized how much grace was present in his life, and that was enough for tears to freely flow, tears of ecstasy. And yeah, that's the feeling I get also, blinding my tearful eyes in this section.
Yeah, and then he says that it burst into these immortal flames of bliss. That's another word that Guruji often uses, isn't it, when he speaks of God and meditation, the bliss that comes with that. Then he goes on to talk about, again, the not transmuting, but becoming one with that. And here comes another one of my standout lines, which is, thou art I am thou, knowing, knower, known as one. I remember when I first read this, the knowing, knower, known as one, I just pored over that line for so long. I remember just reading it over and over again and trying to kind of get my head around it and understand it. And, but as with this poem, I think as a whole, which is something I was actually going to say at the beginning and didn't say, I feel like this poem, yeah, we can study it intellectually, you know, and all of that, but really it's a poem to be studied by the soul. And knowing knower known as one will only, for me, become truly transparent in its fullness of its meaning when the soul study has truly blossomed. But yeah, I feel like this poem you could study with your soul for a long time.
From the previous reading that we had earlier, which was thinking, thought, and thinker have become one. Does that is that on easy? Are those group of words easier to comprehend than knowing, knower, and known?
For me, I prefer the knowing, knower, known. You know, I can comprehend it, but it's the depth and the the vast and the actual experience of it that goes beyond the mind for me. You know, yes, intellectually I can understand it and I can put them in 3 parts and go, okay, yes, yeah. But actually the reality of it is something else, isn't it?
You're ahead of me. I can't even think about it intellectually. It's just some lines in this poem I just have to
yeah, the brain kind of like fizzles and just goes no, I don't know.
Anyway, that's the problem, isn't it? If you keep thinking about it intellectually, then it will hurt.
Yeah,
but you have to feel it, as you said.
Yeah, and Yogi says that about spiritual study. It's the art of it, isn't it? It's not, the whole point isn't to study with the mind, it's to study with the soul and the intuition. He talks about, I think it's actually in the Autobiography of the Yogi, that you meditate on lines until you fully grasp the meaning. So that's something that I'm going to have to do with this poem. And Guruji also talks about here about the ever new peace. He calls it tranquil, eternally living, an unbroken thrill. And I love this whole thought of peace being a thrill. It's sort of not 2 words that you often hear in one sentence. And this whole fact that we can't really imagine samadhi is what Guruji kind of says here. It's too enjoyable to imagine the bliss of this experience. Just going back a little bit to knowing knower known as one. In the Bhagavad Gita, Guruji does actually talk a little bit about this in the commentary. So felt like it might be nice to read it, and then we can gain a little bit more insight. Mike, would you like to start us off, please?
O descendant of Bharata, also know me to be the Kshetrajna perceiver in all Kshetras, the understanding of Kshetra, the known, and Kshetrajna, the knower, that is deemed by me as constituting true wisdom.
And Guruji describes this verse, which is in chapter 13, verse 2, as this stanza refers to the immanent, omniscient nature of spirit. It is he alone who is manifested as countless souls. A yogi is a possessor of true wisdom who understands that God is the only Kshetrajna, the one perceiver in creation, singularly and in all souls encased in physical bodies. God is the only subjective, perceptive, and objective principle existing in and manifesting as the cosmic dream creation. It is the Lord himself who has become all subjective dream beings. He is the cognitive principle in all sentient creatures and in everything else. He also manifests himself as all dream objects and as the dream bodies in creation. The understanding of these truths constitutes true wisdom.
Wow. Thank you, Priyank. Thank you. And hopefully, by understanding the truth and fully embracing the wisdom, we can feel the bliss and the joy of God.
Definitely. Thank you for finding that reading as well. Really nice. I love that he uses the negative description to describe the positive. So he's saying not in an unconscious state, and then he's saying or mental chloroform without, conscious return, which is mental chloroform is like, I think, like numbing or anesthetic agent. So he's saying it's not that. It's not like, some people describe meditation as this kind of negative state, don't they? And I always get a bit frustrated when I hear that. Because they don't, because if you do that, then you kind of dismiss it a little bit, don't you? So he's saying it's not that, but he's saying that this experience of cosmic consciousness, it kind of goes beyond his, experience, in his current experience, his conscious realm. He says it, and then I really love these next few lines. He says beyond his physical limits, he says, and then he says, to the farthest boundary of eternity, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. To the farthest boundary of eternity, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. And it's just insane to think about and visualize what's happening here, because we've all, I'm sure most of us have floated in a vast lake looking up at the sky or an ocean, particularly if it's a very still ocean. And watched to the sky, watched eternity. But here he's saying, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. It's like him seeing himself in a vision where he's seeing the vision. It's like a loop, an infinite loop. And I think this is I put this whole poem in ChatGPT and asked it to come up with a picture. And it did quite a decent job of creating this one line. And it's got this man, and I'll make this the profile picture for this YouTube, and podcast episode. It's got this man floating on like some makeshift boat, and he's got a wand, and he's looking up. He's looking out of a bubble, looking into the sky, and he's on the ocean, looking at himself, another bubble. Inside the bubble, if I've described it very well. So it's like a really beautiful visualization, this line. I think it's one of my favorite lines in this, purely as a means to get away from whatever troubles you may be having in your life, or whatever troubles you think are real. Because if you read these just 3 lines, then you can see that they're imaginary and that they'll float away as bubbles do.
I did the comparative on the ChatGPT. I've included it in there. So maybe if you guys thinks it's worthy, it's somehow including in the podcast somewhere, we can do that. But the planets are sort of melting. Everything's melting into this
Nice.
mirage. And at the center, there's the sun behind a meditative person with an Om symbol in there as well. But it looks very striking as well. So yeah, they've done a good job trying to take all of that poem and find a way to try to visualize it.
It's fun to use Bing AI to create pictures, isn't it? Especially for really abstract things such as this.
and maybe even helpful, if you need something to see. But something that Guruji said that I found very helpful and will find very helpful, and I think it's good for us to remember, is Guruji says that God is consciousness, God is absolute existence, God is ever new joy, and this joy is omnipresent. Feel your oneness with that joy. It resides within you, and it encompasses infinity. Beyond the gross vibratory boundaries of matter, the immutable infinite reigns in all his majesty and vastness. And it all resides within us. It's quite a thought, isn't it? There's so many lines in this poem that you could just delve into for a long time. But from within all of this comes the great Om. And Om is the creative vibration that externalizes all creation, which is very helpfully and succinctly described in footnotes in the Autobiography of Yogi. But Om is written A-U-M, and we were just delving into, where it comes from, why it's written like that. And there is a section in the Gita that talks about this. So Chris is going to read it for us.
This is chapter 10, verse 33. Among the letters sorry, let me start again. Among the letters I am a ...
This is Krishna. This is Krishna speaking. That bit there.
Initial intro. Om is the conglomerate sound of the creative preservative. Preservative, thank you. Can go over that. Preservative and dissolving vibrations of nature, represented respectively by its letters A, Akara, U, Ukara, and M, Makara. It is thus the word of God that was with him from the beginning, his symbol in creation. The Lord in this Gita verse declares himself preeminently in the letter A, creation, for he is in the origin, the infinite source of being, the power that sends forth the modes of nature. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is and which was and which is to come, the Almighty. The Hindu scriptures deal at length with the importance of chanting this sacred word. This sacred word, Om, and of listening in deep meditation to the actual sound of his holy vibration, declaring God's presence in creation.
And we're very fortunate on this path, aren't we, to have a technique that Guruji gave us. So it's quite something, really, isn't it? And Guruji then he talks a lot about, again, the things in creation and what they change into. In this verse, vapors of nebulae, and I love this line: Om blows upon vapors, opening wondrously their veils. Oceans stand revealed, shining electrons. So it just really kind of opens up this cosmic sphere.
The visualization I get with this is my favorite line in this section as well, Lauren. Om blows upon vapors, opening wondrously their veils. Is that you can imagine going through like a single droplet of like moisture, like dew on a blade of grass, and then we often, I think it's like this common theme, isn't it, when like movies and other visualizations, they go into the microscopic, and then from the microscopic they reveal a macro universe. So it's like going into the drop of a dew and then going inside and seeing the whole of creation. So it's like going from, but then he goes back to small again, because then he says he's gone through this veil, and then the ocean stand revealed, which is obviously massive, and then shining electrons. So he goes from small to big, back to small again.
Yeah. And then he says that these grosser lights vanish into eternal rays of all-pervading bliss. And again, we've got that word bliss from Guruji. And Guruji says that God is eternal bliss. His being is love, wisdom, and joy. He is both impersonal and personal, and manifests himself in whatever way he pleases. He appears before his saints in the form each of them holds dear. A Christian sees Christ, a Hindu beholds Krishna or the Divine Mother, and so on. Devotees whose worship takes an impersonal turn become conscious of the Lord as an infinite light, or as the wondrous sound of Om, the primal word, the Holy Ghost. The highest experience man can have is to feel that bliss in which every other aspect of divinity, love, wisdom, immortality, is fully contained.
Very beautiful. The footnote here for Om describes as the creative vibration that externalizes all creation. And that is literally the technique that we're practicing, connecting to that vibration in the Om vibration technique, which lesson students such as ourselves carry out. And we have, like just behind me, as product placement, we have my Om board there that helps you practice that technique. But I think Chris and I have discussed this, but it's such a powerful technique, one of my favorites. And the one line that we kind of missed is in the middle, is it says till at the last sound of the cosmic drum. It's quite a profound little line there, isn't it?
Not so little.
Yeah, it's not so little. Cosmic is massive, but there's a small cosmic, like I don't know. I got the feeling of small and big in this line, because a drum, is not, they're not that big usually. But a cosmic drum obviously is probably as big as the whole of creation. But the last sound of the cosmic drum implies that is the dissolution of creation, isn't it? Where everything vanishes into eternal rays and eternal and all-pervading bliss, which is the next few lines. And again, which is a phenomenal meditation, isn't it? You can read this to yourself and meditate upon it, just those 3 lines.
Yeah. And the union of the bliss, right?
Hopefully, especially if you're feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then comes this line that sometimes brings a tear to my eye when I hear it. Sometimes this is done as an affirmation, or we hear it in services at the center, and it gets me. And it's, from joy I came, for joy I live, and in sacred joy I melt. So there you go. It's all joy, it's all bliss.
Sometimes Guruji refers to this line as from joy I came, for joy I live, and into that sacred joy I melt again. I think one of the metaphysical meditations or the prayers is that. So it's cool that he slightly varies it, but the message is obviously the same.
Yeah. Sometimes even adding like a couple of words can really solidify the meaning for people. Guruji obviously knew that. That's why he does it, right? That's why they're there for us. And then he goes on to talk about this big ocean of the mind, and he's drinking it all in, and the four aspects of creation, solid, liquid, light, vapors, they all lift. And then comes another huge line: I, in everything, enter the great myself. So again, it's that union with God, isn't it? And Guruji's really quite kind to us in this poem, because he explains this union in so many different ways, and the dualities and the moving away from that. And there's something in here, I feel, for everybody. I mean, the whole poem is for everybody, but do you know what I mean? Something that we can really kind of go, oh yeah, I relate to that. And he describes his mental sky as being spotless. And that they are one united ray together. Yeah, Priyank.
Yeah, this ocean of mind, I drink all creation's waves. There's this very profound story in Indian scripture, which is essentially there was poison being churned out of creation. There was a point where creation was becoming poisonous, and you can look up the story. Shiva, and it was going to devour the whole of existence, and Shiva was the only one that could stop it. And how did he stop it? He drank the ocean. He drank that poison, and he, obviously being the ascetic, he can drink and choose what goes in and what stays. So he drank it, but he kept it. He didn't let it go into his stomach. So then, otherwise, he'd die, right? So he kept it just here. And then you see, if you look at images of Shiva, his neck is a different color. It's blue, and that's the story behind that. So here Guruji is say he's experiencing that pastime, ocean of mind. I drink all creation's waves. I think there's a slight reference probably to that pastime. I'll put a Wikipedia link to that story. You can read it. I've probably said it wrong, but it's roughly along those lines. But I really, again, as Lauren said, the line, I in everything enter the great myself. And great and myself are capitalized there, which is important, because he's not entering himself, he's entering essentially God, the great myself, which is again a very, very powerful meditation visualization for ourselves, to imagine us just becoming and merging with God, or in fact, realizing that we are merged with God, because we were never separate. It's just our illusion that we thought we were separate.
One of my favorite chants, I am the bubble making the sea, reference here in some way. A tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself. And the humility and the kind of represents the vastness of true reality, where this is the soul is still but a tiny bubble, represented here. So yeah, when I read that, it reminds me of my favorite devotional chant.
It's such a popular one, isn't it? That one. I'd actually like to ask you all about this line, because it's something I've never been able to grasp quite, about the wording choice and the construction of the sentence. So it says, a tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself. Has anyone got any insight into the I am become the sea of mirth itself part? Because Intellectually, I don't know.
I had the same query actually.
Mm.
I was hoping someone would enlighten us.
Maybe
Beyond me,
one. Yeah.
Listeners, please
Yeah, I was
enlighten
going to
us.
say, one of our
I
dear
am.
listeners, please do share what you think or feel or have perceived or know
So
to be true.
How would you, if it was to make complete sense, and you'd read it as you'd expect it to be written, it would just be, I, a tiny bubble of laughter, have become the sea of mirth itself, right?
Or
But
tiny
here
bubble
he's
of
read,
laughter, I am the sea of
yeah,
mirth itself.
I am
I
become.
am become. But I guess grammar doesn't really have its place with something like this if it means explaining something truthfully. So I am. So he is, but he's become it. If that makes sense. So
yeah, but he's obviously done it very intentionally, right?
yeah,
And in
and it's
poetry,
the last line.
yeah,
So
in
it's
poetry, you're allowed to do that.
key.
So the other way of reading it would be, a tiny bubble of laughter, I become the sea of mirth itself. But the word the word am kind
You
of,
can't miss it out.
you can't miss out. It makes it a lot more mysterious, but also quite a lot more powerful. I am become.
Yeah.
I cheated. I talked to ChatGPT just to see if there was this poetic, structure that maybe it could give some insight to, but actually sort of said what you guys just said. So well done. It said three things: the emphasis on transformation being placed, I, on its own line, isolates the subject from the sea of mirth itself, makes it more striking. The second thing was the rhythmic flow. It creates a natural pause, which gives the reader a moment to absorb this profound change that's happening between the I and the am. And the third thing is this duality and unity. Structurally separating I and am symbolizes the dissolution of the individual self into the universal, as the speaker transitions from a small, distinct bubble into the sea of mirth. So, yeah, nailed it, guys.
Oh, Chris, the very technical description of what is happening there. The line preceding as well, eternity and I, one united ray. It's really, really, really nice, isn't it? It's like there's no beginning or end. Yeah. And also, he had the line present, past, future, no more for me. It kind of is a parallel to this line, which is eternity and I, one united ray. And what a fantastic way to end the poem, right? Because I don't know if you have experienced this, but when you write something, sometimes it's really difficult to end it. If you write a short story at school, for example, it's probably when we last wrote a story. You, I don't know if you can recall, but I distinctly recall, how do you end this? It's so difficult to end. And then you have to really ponder on it, because for some reason the ending is really important, as is the beginning. But here he's really ended the poem emphatically, and it doesn't even feel like it's the end, does it? It feels like it's what's the word? Feels like it feels like it's the beginning of the process for us. And we've got to experience it. Sorry, what did you say, Chris?
Ever existing, ever new, ...
This whole Samadhi experience, as I mentioned, Guruji and Gotuk Siddharjana described it in Lord Buddha described it, and then here also, a few months ago I was doing a service reading, and it was very by chance I just found this section where he was writing this, and I thought this would go perfectly for our Samadhi description, so I'll read it out. He said, this is in service 2, volume 2, service 17, if anyone wants to find it. He says, I will share with you a recent experience I had in the superconscious state. I was sitting in the library here at Mount Washington Center when suddenly my breath disappeared. My limbs became rigid, and I found myself watching the process of death within my body. Breath and the power of movement had left the body, and yet I was conscious. This experience of death was not frightening, but wonderful. I saw my body and all nature as a cosmic motion picture created from God's light. Joyously I cried, Lord, this whole world is nothing but a movie. There is no death. So it was a really nice synchronicity that I read this, and I was leading the service for that. And this is an interesting comparison as well, the poem, how Guruji finished the poem, eternity and I, one united ray, a tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself, to how Buddha finished the poem. Lauren, do you want to read how he finished, or how Edwin Arnold finished the poem of Buddha's description of enlightenment?
Thus finishing the path, blessed nirvana, sinless, stirless rest, that change which never changes.
Same way.
Similar.
Yeah.
It's quite a poem, isn't it? And that's not really doing it justice to what it is, me saying that. So that being the end of the poem, I think that brings us to a little point of reflection about the Samadhi poem in general and this episode and how that's been for us. I think for me that my main sort of takeaway, as I touched upon earlier, is that, this really is a poem to be studied by the soul. It's great to delve in with the mind, but ultimately it's the soul study that reigns supreme. So it's really inspired me a lot to do that, and I feel really grateful that we've done this today, because it always just gives me so much when we delve into Guruji's works, and especially with the readings and all of that. So thank you for today.
Yeah, it feels like a privilege to read it, as you were saying, that the insight, the revelations that say that might actually come of this are going to be beyond the initial realization, the initial appreciation of it. And hopefully it's little packages that will sort of open up as we continue on our path. I think this is the most striking, looking back when I first read the Autobiography of a Yogi, somehow this didn't stay in my mind, whether or not I read it with proper concentration, or maybe I skim read it or something initially in my state at the time. But now reading this in more depth, it's the most significant piece in the autobiography so far to this point for me. It's just incredibly profound to read and digest. So thanks. Just have a lot of gratitude to be able to sit and digest all of you.
Did people prefer the plain English description, which we kind of had in the previous couple of pages, or the poetic Samadhi poem description? It's one for us to ponder upon. I like both. Probably prefer the poem, to be honest, even though I usually prefer plain English as opposed to poetry, because because I'm essentially quite lazy in terms of interpreting English. Whereas with the poetry, you have to really put a lot of effort into it, don't you, Chris?
Yeah, but saying that, Guruji's genius is that it makes it accessible. It isn't so cryptic that you know, it is beyond some grasp in some reading. It makes it somehow, whether it's just charged with this magnetism and realization, that it makes it accessible, that experience, and so relatable in some way. So thanks to Guruji for I suppose simplifying it for us.
You do have to. I had to churn anyway. I still have to churn to glean more and more out of this poem.
Yeah.
But the words most commonly used are the feeling that I get when I read this poem are joy and bliss, most common themes, and it's very reflective for the emotion for us, probably all of us, when we think back to this poem or read it. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I got the oneness, you know, the I everywhere, my own one being, thou art I, I'm thou. So on. Just I'll not read on too much, but there's so many there, to this union, this realization of oneness, the self, the true self. So yeah, it's a golden thread.
What I find really special about this poem is that Guruji shared it with us. You know, he didn't have to, but he knew what it would do for us. And, you know, one of the big reasons I love this path so much is because Guruji shows us the way back home. He's, you know, and how to do that. And he's always reminding us of what we are. And that is a reflection of God, right? And there's this affirmation that I'd just like to share with you all. We don't necessarily have to do the affirmation together, but I just thought that it would be of use, and maybe at some point in our lives we can use it. The affirmation is: Heavenly Father, thy cosmic life and I are one. Thou art the ocean, I am the wave. We are one. I demand my divine birthright, intuitively realizing that all wisdom and power already exist in my soul. God is just behind my reason, today and every day, and is guiding me to do the right thing always.
Powerful. Powerful stuff. Very well read, Lauren. And it made me remember actually that the words are really important. Like if you listen to Lauren's words, or Guruji's words that Lauren spoke, everything is very much linked to the Samadhi poem and all of our teachings. And you will find, if you look on Google, you'll find the Samadhi poem that's printed on various websites, but it won't be exactly the same as the one that's published in the Self-Realization Fellowship Autobiography of Yogi book. It has some differences. So if you're ever referring to the poem, go from the Self-Realization Fellowship book, because there are some differences, and the history of those differences we won't go through here, but the approved authorized version is the edition that we have in the Self-Realization Fellowship.
Thank you, Priyank. Yes, as always, go to the source. I think for me, that's always the key, you know. Something that came to mind when I was, after I'd read the poem many times, was something that you'd shared with me, Priyank, from a talk from Brother Anandamoy, who had said that there's this saying in the Indian scriptures, which is, know it now or after 1,000 incarnations. And Brother Anandamoy says, meaning, do you want to come back time and time again and miss the purpose of life? And
No,
we don't. We want to go home. And you know, this poem inspires me to go, actually, yeah, I do want to know it now. I don't want another 1,000 incarnations. It's now. It's in this life. Yeah, it's a very kind of inspiring and rousing thought. So does anyone have anything else that they would like to share about the Samadhi poem?
Lovely. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we got one more thing,
We do.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we got, during the pandemic, we had a project at the London group of each member of the London group was reading out one line of the Samadhi poem. And it turned out a beautiful video. And we're gonna play this now, and it's gonna play us out. So, Jai Guru, everybody.
Jai Guru.
Samadhi by our beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda.
Vanish the veils of light and shade.
Lifted every vapor of sorrow.
Sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy.
Gone the dim sensory mirage.
Love, hate, health, disease, life, death, perished these false shadows on the screen of duality.
The storm of Maya stilled by magic wand of intuition deep.
Present, past, future, no more for me, but ever present, all flowing I, everywhere.
Planets, stars, stardust, earth, volcanic bursts of doomsday cataclysms, creation's molding furnace, glaciers of silent X-rays, burning electron floods.
Thoughts of all men, past, present, to come.
Every blade of grass, myself, mankind, each particle of universal dust.
Anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust, I swallowed, transmuted all into a vast ocean of my own one being.
Smouldering joy, oft puffed by meditation, blinding my tearful eyes, burst into immortal flames of bliss, consuming my tears, my frame, my all.
Thou art I am thou, knowing, knower, known as one.
Tranquil, unbroken thrill, eternally living, ever new peace. Enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy. Samadhi bliss.
Not an unconscious state or mental chloroform without willful return.
Samadhi, that extends my conscious reign beyond limits of mortal frame to farthest boundary of eternity.
Where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little eagle floating in me.
mobile murmurs of atoms are heard. The dark earth, mountains, veils, low, molten liquid. Flowing seas change into vapours of nebulae.
Om blows upon vapours, opening wondrously their veils. Oceans stand revealed, shining electrons, till, at the last sound of the cosmic drum,
vanish the grosser lights into eternal rays of all-pervading bliss.
From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt.
Ocean and light.
I drink all creation's waves.
4 veils of solid, liquid, vapor, light, lift aright.
I, in everything, enter the great myself, gone forever, fitful, flickering shadows of mortal memory.
Spotless is my mental sky, below, ahead, and high above.
Eternity and I, one united ray.
A tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself.